Hey everybody, my name is Frank and this is the PothOnProgramming video log. Today we're starting part 2 of the Stay Down devlog. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this little example and we're going to go ahead and add keyboard controls. Probably going to make them jump, make them move left and right, that sort of thing. And might end the video there, might go further, I'm not really sure. See what we can do. Alright, so let me just reorient myself here. Probably should have did this before I started recording, but left off yesterday. We just had him hitting the ground. So before we can actually start doing anything really, I guess I need to make the controller. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a controller class. Let's go ahead and add a new file, call it controller.js. Inside of this, we're gonna make a constant. I could make this a class or a function that I can instantiate, but instead, since there's only ever going to be one controller object, I'm just going to make it a constant and I'm going to put it in an object literal. So the controller is going to have a left key, a right key, and an up key. I might add more later. So for now, these are just going to be false. False is going to indicate that the key is not being pressed. True would indicate that the key is being pressed. So I have a controller, it's got 3 keys in it, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pull this controller.js file into my HTML. So I'm gonna come down here, add another script tag with the source equal to controller.js. Since this is kind of like a utility, I'm gonna put this in first. Eventually I'm going to have to find a way to organize my files and stuff. For now, since this is small, I'm not really too worried about it, but I might have to do a video just on like refactoring everything, or refactoring like the file system. But for now, let's just forge ahead. Alright, so now I have my controller class, or my controller object rather. I'm going to need some event listeners to actually listen for key up and key down events. So I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to add window.addEventListener key down, and then I need a function. I'm gonna have one function. It's gonna handle key up and key down. So we're just gonna call it key down up. And I'm gonna make that function in just a minute. Window.addEventListener key up, key down up, and I'm going to keep the event handler functions inside of the main.js file. So let's go ahead and put that somewhere. Let's put it down by the bottom. Call it function key down up, takes an event. Right away, I'm just going to do event.prevent default. That's going to prevent the default action from pressing a key. So let's say you use the arrow keys to scroll. Prevent default is going to prevent that from making the browser window scroll. Of course, we don't have any scrollable content, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway just to be safe. All right, so let's do event.keyCode. Alright, so when I save this and I refresh my screen and I bring up the DevTools with F12, which isn't working for some reason. Hitting F12 is just not working. I'm going to, how do we bring up DevTools? I guess just inspect. We'll bring up the DevTools. I'm so used to F12, I almost forgot how to do that. Alright, so let's see what we get. 68, that's the D key, left, up, right. So left is 37, up is 38, right is 39. So let's go ahead and use that information inside of our key down up event handler. So that's actually a pretty cool way to figure out what keys you're using. If you're not trying to always figure out what your ASCII, your ASCII key codes are, you're going online looking up what's the value of, the A key or whatever, You can just use console.log event.keycode. That's a way easier way to do it without having to look anything up or memorize anything. Let's go ahead and just do switch event.keycode case 37. So that's left, case 38, that's up, and case 39, that would be right. All right, so we're gonna say controller.left equals something. So we need to figure out what that's gonna be. I don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of it. So since this is handling key up and key down events, we need to find a way to differentiate what that is, which event is coming in, and the way we do that is with event.type. Now I'll just set this to true. So now when I go ahead and refresh and I press down, I'm getting key down events. When I pull up, I'm getting key up. So key down, key up. Cool. So now we know how we can switch between those two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable, call it state, and I'm going to set that equal to event.type equals, we're going to set it to the condition event.type equals key down. So if event.type is equal to key down, state is going to be true because this evaluates out to a Boolean. So if we have a key down event, we're going to be setting state to true. If not, if it's anything else like key up, we're going to be setting state to false. So that's a really easy way to know what the state of your key is. Get rid of that. And now, instead of having two event listeners, one for key down, one for key up, and having some complex way of figuring out, well, actually it wouldn't be complex, it would just be two event handlers. Basically we condense it down into one, we set state equal to event.type, we convert that to a Boolean, and then we go ahead and set our keys just equal to state. So the value of controller.left, up, and right is just going to be state, and we'll see if it works in a minute. Controller.up equals state. Finally, controller right equals state. I don't need a break on that last case, and the reason being is there are no cases below it. That's just how the switch statement works. But a lot of times people just put the break in there anyway. You don't really need it because there's no reason to break. It's the end of the switch statement, so we don't need it. Let's go ahead and go to the update function. So now we're going to go to the update function and we're going to actually put these to use. So I'm going to say if controller.left player.x minus minus. So just like we did with falling in the last video, we're just going to change the player's x property. All right, cool. So I'm pressing the left key and I moved off the screen, and I can't move back because I don't have the right key in there yet. Before we go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function to move the player left or right. So I'm actually going to go into the player class here, and I'm going to say, let's see, this dot move force. I don't know, move force might be a little cryptic or whatever you want to call it. I guess I could say move speed. I'm going to go with force. Move force equals 1. And then I'm going to go into the player prototype and I'm going to say move left. Sure, move left. I don't know if I want to move left and a move right function or just a single move function. I'm going to do move left just for readability. So move left is going to be a function where this dot velocity x plus equals minus equals actually this dot move force. And then move move right. Move force. Okay, so now we've got our two functions, move left and move right inside the player prototype. We can go ahead and use those now inside the update function. So instead of actually hard coding this stuff in to the update function, well, I guess it's all going to be hard coded in, but now I have like a nice little function name to look at inside of my main JS file instead of actual math, which this is very simple math, but I would rather have the function there. So I'm just going to say player.move left. And I feel like that's a lot. If controller.left, player.move left, like that's really easy to read and look at. You understand what's going on. You don't have to try to sift through what's going on here. And then we're going to do if controller.right, player.move right. Okay, so now we've got our two functions. Let's go back to player. What we're doing here is we're changing the velocity. So we need to actually have a function here to update the player's position. So I'm going to take this out of the update position. So we're going to take the actual math out of the main JS file to move the player, like player.y plus player.velocity_y, and we're going to do a function instead, player.update position, and let's see, player.update position. I'm going to come back, I'm going to put this inside of here. So we're going to be updating the player's Y position and the player's X position. Player.velocity_x. And also what we could do inside of update position is apply gravity and friction, but I think I'm going to save that for, I don't know if I want an external function doing that. I'm just going to put it all inside the update position function. So now I'm going to pull all this stuff out, gravity and friction. We're still going to have to pass it in. I don't know. This might not be the best way to do it, but we might have to redo that in the future. So now we have to pass in gravity and friction. So player.velocity_y plus equals gravity, player.velocity_x, or velocity_y times equals friction. We're going to want to do the same thing for x, but let's see what we got so far. See if we're not breaking something. We are. Player is not defined. Player is not defined because I have a syntax error. A really easy one. All right. Now I have even more problems. Player is not defined. Player.update position, probably because I used a capital P. Nope. Let's see. Player is not defined at player.update position. That probably means I messed up the code inside of this here. That's where it's actually happening. I was looking in the main file for some reason. I'm going to have to do this instead of player. Let's do this the smart way. And save, refresh. Okay, that fixes it. All right, so now I still don't have, oh wait, I do, cool. So now I don't have any friction, but I'm able to press the left and right key, and let me actually put something in here to show that I'm actually pressing the left and right key. Inside of the, where's my handler, my key down handler? Okay, so now you guys can actually see me pressing the keys. So that's pretty cool. I All right, so we've got movement. Obviously, we don't have friction. Next up, we got to add some friction and probably make this guy jump. So let's go add some friction. First, we'll go back to player, update position. We add gravity and friction, I guess, to the velocity y. Let's do the velocity x. This dot velocity x times equals friction. Save, refresh. Now we kind of slow down. So we actually come to a stop. Technically, we're never stopping because friction just brings us closer and closer to zero, but we're getting to the point where the x velocity is so small it's not even perceivable. We might want to round it down at a certain point. That might be a good thing to do, but for now this works pretty good. So now all we need to do is just make this guy jump. So let's go over here and inside of the update function, if controller.up player.jump. So I'm gonna have a function for jump as well. So we got move left, move right, and jump. Let's go ahead and go to player. Add jump to the prototype. This dot velocity y minus equals this dot jump force. And this is why I want to call move force the same thing, because I've used jump force before and I kind of like the way that looks. And it makes more sense for jumping because you're applying the force one time and from there you're kind of decaying it in your jump arc. But with move force, it's kind of weird because you're applying it on, I guess it makes sense because you're applying move force on every frame of animation. Whatever, move force works, jump force, they're uniform together. This dot jump force equals do I want to do, let's do jump force equals 16, keep it positive. So jump force is 16. When I jump, velocity y minus equals this dot jump force. Save, refresh. All right, so now I can jump, so that's kind of cool, but I'm not stopping my ability to jump once I get off the ground. So ideally I would only be able to jump one time. What's happening is I'm subtracting jump force from my y velocity on every frame of my game loop here. So I'm gonna go back into, let's go ahead and add a flag to the player to stop this. So we're gonna say this dot grounded equals false. So grounded is basically going to just be a flag when the player collides with the top of something. In this case, the ground is the only thing he can collide with as of yet. Grounded is going to be true whenever he enters into a collision with the top of something. When his bottom hits the top of something else, grounded is going to be true. When he jumps, grounded is going to be false. Cool. All right, so when we jump, grounded is false. Grounded initializes to false. When we hit the ground, grounded equals true. Okay, so this needs a condition inside of it. So if this dot grounded, so if we are on the ground, and this is how we're actually going to make this work so we don't rocket into space every time we press the up key. If this dot grounded, so if the player is grounded, then we set grounded to false. So the player is no longer grounded, and we set velocity y, we subtract jump force from velocity y. So that works too. That should work. So let me go ahead and save. This is going to only allow us to probably jump one time. It doesn't even allow us to jump one time. Probably because we never set grounded to true. So let me go back here, and when we get collide top, so this is going to be interesting because in order to keep the collide top function working with rectangle type objects and not player type objects, Basically what I'm saying is I don't want the collide top function to necessarily know anything about the object other than that it's a rectangle or an object that extends the rectangle class. Because with collision, I just want to be working with the collision stuff. I want to be able to use this function on different game objects that may or may not even be able to jump, so they wouldn't have the grounded flag property. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this function collide top return true or false, so I can use it in another condition that checks to see if grounded is something we can manipulate. So let's do if rectangle.getBottom is greater than top, then we're going to have a collision. So we're going to say rectangle.setBottomTop, and we're going to return true. So there was a collision. If that does not happen, we're going to return false. So now collide top is not just a function that does something for us, it actually tells us something as well. So we can actually determine if we have collided with anything. So now instead of just calling collide top, we're going to say if collide top player and ground.top, get rid of my semicolon, if the player is colliding with the ground's top, then player dot grounded equals true. And this is something I want to avoid. I want to avoid, and this might not be the right way to go about things, but I personally feel it would be best to avoid setting properties directly inside of the main JS file just for cleanliness. Like, I don't want to be setting properties or doing math or doing anything that's even mildly complex inside of this main JS file, because I want to keep it as clean and readable as possible. And all of the behind the scenes dirty work, so to speak, is going to be done in the individual files themselves. So what I'm going to do is, instead of setting grounded to true, we're going to do player.ground. Fine, that'll do it. Player.ground. So now I gotta make a function called ground on the player prototype. Grounded equals true. Let's see if it works. All right, so that actually works. That's pretty cool. The only problem is, if you take a close look, the jump height seems to be kind of weird. Let me go ahead and make this 32. That's way too, this is like not even, this jump height is stupid for a platformer. You need to jump like at least 3 times as high as your character. So let's go ahead and make this, now he's just gonna jump. That's a pretty decent size, but if I hold the key down, oh, you know what's happening? This is not a good way to show you guys this. Let me do something different. 24 maybe. I want to show you what's happening because I'm not actually canceling the jump, or I'm not canceling the Y velocity of the player when I hit the ground. I think I'm not. So this should give me like a funky jump, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go back to like 18. I just want to show you this real quick and then fix it. This way you know, like, you can see why I'm doing what I'm doing. So as you can see, I'm kind of getting like 2 different jump heights here. I'll use the mouse for reference. See how like that initial jump, that first jump is like super short, and the second jump is higher. So the first jump is short, the second jump is higher. The reason for that is because we're not setting the player's Y velocity to 0 when he hits the ground. So what's happening is Y velocity is still, let's say we hit the ground, we're falling at 10 pixels per frame. The Y velocity is going to be 10, and when we subtract our jump force from that, we're going to get a smaller number, like -4 or something like that, or -8 in this case, because jump velocity was 18. So let's go ahead and fix that. We're going to go to the, we can't go to the collide top function, but what I'm going to do is, inside of player.ground, I'm going to set Y velocity to 0. So let's go back to the player. Inside of the ground function, we're also going to set Y velocity to 0. This dot velocity y equals 0. Save, refresh. Alright, so now it doesn't matter. I guess what I could have done to show you guys this was just console.log the y velocity. That would have made way more sense. Let me do that instead real quick. Console.log this dot velocity y. And I'll comment that out. So now we're going to see some problems with the y velocity. So as you can see, I'm just holding the jump key down, so I'm going to get a pretty consistent y velocity. But when I let up off of it, like, see how I'm getting different values? It ends up at 5, but we're getting slightly different values. We want a consistent jump every time. So if I go ahead and uncomment that, I'm going to get the same jump every single time, whereas before I was getting kind of a messed up jump. And if you look, I'm actually jumping higher, because before it was like 5 or something like that, 5 point something. Now it's 7. The reason for that is because I'm setting y velocity to 0 when I hit the ground. So when I'm jumping, I'm not jumping when my y velocity is already positive. I'm not already falling when I jump, because if you're going to subtract from your y velocity when you're already falling down, you're going to get less than that value that you subtract going up. Probably way too complicated an explanation for this simple thing. As you can see, it's working pretty nice. The thing to keep in mind is that when you hit the ground, you just want to set y velocity to 0. This way your player doesn't keep falling. That's like a way simpler way to explain that there. All right, so now we have, if I save this and I refresh, now we have a player that can move side to side. The player can jump. It's pretty sweet. It actually looks pretty nice too. Like, it's a pretty fluid jump. Let me think about what I want to do with this for a minute. I think it'd be cool if I actually had an actual, I guess I could actually do a live stream. I think that's what this channel is eventually going to go towards, just live streaming this, so I could have like comments and stuff and actually communicate with you people out there in the world. That'd be pretty fun. For now, I'm just doing like the static recording, and I'm still not editing. I'm just going to upload this when I'm done with it. But it'd be cool. I could even have like people be like, hey, you should take it this direction, or you should take it that direction. That'd be pretty cool too. Because right now, I think what I'm looking at is just making this basic little platformer, but I'm sure you guys have some cool ideas. If you have ideas on what you want in this to make it a little bit cooler, along the same line that I mentioned in the first video, just making the platforms move up and this guy has to kind of avoid getting pushed off the top of the screen. Like, if you have other features that you think would be cool, like, mention them. And if they're not too complicated, because I want to keep this one simple, I'll see if I can implement them, because that would be pretty neat. I think for today, I'm going to call this a day, because this is pretty cool and it seems to work all right. And then in the next video, I think what I'm going to do is probably resize the screen to make it full screen and make it scalable. So what I'm talking about is we're actually going to zoom in on the screen, or make the screen fit the browser window or whatever the window size of the device is, and keep the aspect ratio of the game the same. So that's going to be pretty cool. Probably also going to do a fixed time step game loop. But don't hold me to it. I might start up the video tomorrow and just be like, you know, whatever. Might want to add something else. Might want to add graphics. So we'll see where we go. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and have a great day. All right. Get this here.